time for our fantasy science fiction review. Really, I could see some parallels with Krull and Star Wars, but most of those is because of the shared influences, what inspired these two movies. And oddly enough, I think there's a few more characters that you could relate more to the prequels, which were released after Krull, rather than characters in Krull to the original series, with the exception of perhaps one character here. So, I got notes. First thing is, I need to correct myself. I said Krull was the name of the monster, the main villain here, but actually Krull is the name of the planet, the world that our story is taking place on. The bad guy is just known as the Beast. The opening is gorgeous. This shot, you could kind of compare it to the opening scenes of A New Hope and some of the other opening scenes from Star Wars movies. It's, like I said, a beautiful soundtrack by my mind's going blank on his name. I can't think of his name. Okay, but anyway, it's a beautiful soundtrack. You open with outer space, and you do see this big ship, and it's a long shot, and you see a planet and moon. I think it's like both the planet and a moon, and it's a very beautiful emerald-like planet. The spaceship that you see is the Black Fortress, which looks like a gnarly giant stone, or a fossilized tree, because it's long, but it has all these jagged, but it's kind of like a tree that's all splintered and has been fossilized. So it doesn't look like anything, or design-wise, like what you would see in Star Wars. And the ship itself is the main bad guy's fortress. And once it lands, the Beast minions are called the Slayers. And the Slayers, they actually do look like they belong to science fiction. They're very alien-looking, very scary and otherworldly. They actually have these really cool staffs that shoot lasers. So, like I said before, like, the fact that they're on another planet, another world, it's Krull, so that's the science fiction element. And then the bad guys themselves have some science fiction elements to it, a little more than I remembered. But they do still, even though it's the science fiction, some of the otherworldly elements of them also still feels very much like fantasy. Inside the Black Fortress, you'd get a sense almost like it's an extension of the Beast himself, because he kind of controls it with his mind, it would seem, the way there's traps. It's not like security and booby traps are being set off, but like walls actually closing, places just kind of changing, the way the floors open up to swallow people and then closes to cut people off of one another. But that's all in the final act, so sorry. But it is really interesting. So in my notes, it does open with a voiceover. It starts off with, "This it was given to me to know," and then goes on a little bit into some insights into the bad guy being the Beast. And then it says, the narrator says he's not sure, though, if the prophecy is true. And the prophecy is that a woman of ancient name will choose her husband. She shall choose a king, and together they shall rule the galaxy. Well, that's kind of shorthand. What it really is she shall choose her husband, and their child shall rule the galaxy. So I do think, even though the Beast doesn't explicitly say so, but in his conversations with Lissa, that's the princess, or, well, queen technically, and actually they do call her a queen. Um, at the beginning of the movie, the very first act, you have the voiceover, you see this black fortress coming, it lands on Krull, and then the narration and of some of the things that's going on, and basically the Slayers and the Beasts have been just destroying the villages on this planet, and this planet has 2 kingdoms, and one of them, they mentioned the king's names, but I don't remember their names off the top of my head. There's a lot of, like, strange names, kind of hard to keep track of without taking notes. But one king has a son named Colwyn, the other king has a daughter named Lissa, and the 2 fathers, it's really implied that these 2 kingdoms have been fighting with one another before the Beast shows up. So now they're both fighting the Beast, but the 2 kings, they still don't get along with one another, but their children has decided that it's necessary for them to form a union with one another, an alliance sealed with their marriage. And so even though both the fathers are tentatively against it, the movie really opens up with Lissa talking to her father and getting worried because Colwyn should have been there by now with the remnants of his army for the wedding ceremony. And I have to say this part. When Colwyn does show up, like, the 2 characters are hardly ever with one another. And I do think they use the word love way too quickly. But the sense of chemistry, like, on one hand, they know one another's reputations. And so it's like their agreement and the reason why they proposed this marriage. And it seems very much like this was Lissa's idea, this marriage. It was her idea. It's like they know one another only by their reputations the first time they're meeting one another. And they have a little bit of banter, but there's like this immediate spark and chemistry between the 2. And there's a little time and between their first meeting and a little banter and stuff before the wedding ceremony. And of course, just before the wedding ceremony is completed, that's when the Slayers come to take Lissa away. And the marriage is, the ceremony has this very mystic thing going on with water and fire. And it'll come back later because the 2 kings have extinguished torches symbolically saying that their 2 kingdoms are no more, but rather it will be one kingdom ruled by their children. And then the wedding ceremony starts, and Colwyn has a torch, and he says, "My fire I give to water." And then Lissa, she puts her hand in the water, and she says, "Water gives me fire," or something like that, and this flame I'll give to the man who I choose as my husband. But that's, like, before she can hand that flame off to Colwyn is when the Slayers come in. So you have kind of a generic fight scene. It's kind of interesting because you have, I said generic, but it isn't, because there's this contrast, because the armies that belong to the 2 former kings, so now they belong to Queen Lissa and King Colwyn, they have swords and things, even though they have this armor that's not quite medieval. It actually looks a little science fiction. Like, if you think of the Red Guards from Star Wars, they look like that, except one kingdom's guards are in blue and the other kingdoms are in red. But they kind of look like that in style. But they have swords, and so they have like this more swashbuckling kind of fighting going on, where the Slayers have these huge, like I said, spears that are shooting lasers at them. So it's kind of interesting, and There's certain weaknesses, though, on the Slayer's armors that if you stab them, then the armor dissipates and these little ugly-looking alien things shrieks and die and everything. So it's kind of gruesome, but you don't get too many shots like that. Also, this movie is rated PG, but it's before the PG-13 rating came along. I don't know if it was rated now, if it would still get the PG rating or not, because it's not really gruesome. So, I'm not sure. And there's really nothing inappropriate aside from some of the monster deaths and stuff that I would think would be any cause for concern with the ratings or anything like that. So it's a family friendly kind of fantasy sort of story. And one of the things I really liked about it is once the story gets going, you are introduced to characters of all ages, pretty much, that join Colin on his quest here. Not just to save Lissa, but to destroy the beast to save their world. So, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. The narrator is actually a hermit from the mountains. He's called the Ancient One. So we can just call him Obi-Wan Kenobi from now, if you want. This is like the first character you could really compare to any of the characters in like the original trilogy. But you could also very easily compare him to somebody from, let's say, he's a lot like Merlin in certain ways, in the way he comes and he knows things, and he doesn't necessarily uses a lot of magic, but he knows a lot of people who use magic. He has some healing skills, so I don't know if you do RPG, he'd probably be like a white mage or something like that. He's not a strong fighter. He doesn't use anything like that. But he heals people, and the only person who survived this whole attack on the kingdom, because the two kings are murdered, all of the armies are destroyed. They were there for the wedding, and they're destroyed. And when the Ancient One shows up, the only one that we see him reviving is Colin, and even though it doesn't explicitly say that he brought him back from the dead, considering when Colin was shot by one of the lasers just like anybody else was, it only makes sense to assume that some magic was used to bring him back. Because, I mean, otherwise his injuries was just as bad as everybody else who died. So it doesn't make sense for everybody else to be dead but him to live, unless the Ancient One brought him back. The Ancient One does have an actual character name, but I don't remember what it was. And he actually gets called the Ancient One more than his actual name. So, this character informs Colin of the glaive. Now, the glaive is a symbol of Colin's kingdom. And Colin says, it's a symbol. We don't need symbols. We need weapons. We need an army. And the Ancient One tells him, look, you can't go against the beast with just an army. He's even stronger than the Slayers, and look what the Slayers have been doing to you. You've been fighting them. They're defeating you. You need to get the glaive. So, basically the movie follows like a series of missions. It's kind of like different levels to a video game, or like if you're watching a serial fantasy Pulp Fiction or something, you have these different little tasks you have to complete before you can face the main big bad guy. So of course his first one is to retrieve the glaive, this ancient weapon that is up in a mountain, and only, they don't say the chosen one in this, but it's pretty clear. Only the chosen one is going to be able to get this glaive. Everybody else, anybody else who's attempted to get this, has not come back down this mountain. So you go up the mountain, so beautiful score, and scenery and stuff, and then he goes into the opening, and it's very volcanic-like, so. And he actually has to put his hand in the lava to pull out the glaze. So, of course, no normal person would have been able to do this task. So, essentially, you do have more of, like, pulling the sword out of the stone. It's very much more like a King Arthur, Robin Hood storyline than it is Star Wars. But again, there might be some similarities there because George Lucas said he wanted to make Star Wars like a fantasy in space. He wanted to use elements from different folklore and mythology. So you are going to see some archetypes here used. So once he has the glaive, he's told not to use it unless he needs it, and he'll know when he needs it. He's given more instructions. The Black Fortress, which is the Beast Fortress, moves and appears in different places at sunset. So each day at sunset, it's a new place, and nobody can tell, like, where it's going to reappear at. So you have to find it before it moves, and trying to get there before it moves and everything is this long, arduous thing. But since it's so late, now that he's got the glaive, they have to go on this long journey to go find a seer, because the seer can tell them where the Black Fortress will reappear next. So if they can get, like, ahead of it a little bit, then they can actually fight the beast. So, next mission is to find the seer. But this is actually broken up in kind of 4 parts here, because it's on this task that he picks up different members that will be a part of his army, so his traveling companions. So the first one is, while him and the Ancient One are in the woods, no less, they actually meet Jar Jar Binks. I'm serious. Again, this movie was made in 1983, so it's before the prequels, and yet you can kind of see the parallels, okay? This thing comes crashing down, boom, and it turns out to be this failed magician who's all on his own and everything. But this guy actually has a slightly worse character than Jar Jar when we first meet him, because he's a really bad magician. He's always messing things up. He has his notes. He's always bumbling through them. His name is actually Argo. And on top of that, he has very bad scruples. He's a thief. He thinks a pie. He has this long introduction for himself. You know, he's a short guy, but he's just got this short guy complex, trying to overcompensate for everything all the time and failing at it. But then the next one, they're going through the woods more, and they are attacked by bandits, which basically all of the members of this group can correspond with characters from Robin Hood's Merry Men. And among them, no less, is Liam Neeson. So, it's kind of funny and interesting. This is actually my favorite scene in the movie, because the conversation. At first, the bandits claim that there's 100 men, but there's only like 10 or 12 of them. And they don't believe, of course, Colwyn when he says he's the king. But Colwyn has the keys to these shackles. All these guys, they're escaped prisoners, so they still have shackles on their wrists and the chains dangling, where they were able to break the chains, but they're still stuck with these shackles on. So Colwyn gives them a chance to join him to defeat the beast and save Krull. And the leader mocks him, and the leader kind of reminds me of a version of Will Scarlet. He does wear red, and he's just like that tough guy. He's the leader, and kind of corresponds a little bit with Will Scarlet of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Because if you remember in that movie, I believe if I'm remembering correctly, Christian Slater plays Will Scarlet, and he was the leader of the bandits before Robin Hood comes back from the Crusades and then becomes the leader of the bandits. So one of the boys, I will call him Munch, because basically he does correspond to Munch. He's the youngest, he's the smallest, and he immediately rises to the challenge and says that he will join the cause. And so Colin pulls the key and starts to unlock this kid's shackles. And I say kid, but he's probably a young teenager, about 16-ish, 17. So the leader here and Liam Neeson's character, they're surprised, and they're like, wait a minute. The only ones who have the keys to these shackles is the king and the king's marshal. Colin's like, that's exactly right. And he calls them out on their cowardice, because basically these bandits, they only want money. They're like, courage doesn't, or what was the word? Honor, whatever. It only gets you so far. It doesn't. It's an empty purse. You can't count it. It's worthless. But they're kind of shamed when they realize this guy really is the king. He's not just some lunatic claiming to be the king. So they agree to join him, but when Colin offers to take the rest of their shackles off, their leader says, I will keep these shackles on until our mission's complete, or I will die with them on. So of course that becomes kind of a not ongoing, but it picks back up near the end. I do want to be careful not to give away too many spoilers, because this is one of those journeys. At first, you're getting a lot of people join, and then as you get closer to the climax, you're losing members of this journey. And some of them you don't get to know as well as others. And honestly, I would really find it interesting if as long as you're rebooting things. Krull, the storyline itself actually has a lot of potential. I very much could see it as a 4-part miniseries, 4 1-hour-long episodes. As it is, the movie is about 2 hours. It's 121 minutes long, exactly. So, if you stretched it out into 4 hours, we could get to know the world better, and I think that would be fun. And to get to know some of these other characters a little bit better before they start dropping like flies. I won't say who, when, or how they start dropping. So, then their next person that they pick up is a Cyclops. And he has an interesting storyline, but again, I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but the Ancient One tells them about how the Cyclops came to be Cyclops, because they were a people from another planet that had 2 eyes, but when the Beast came, they made a deal with him that they would trade 1 eye if they could see the future. So the Beast agreed to the deal, only he cheated them, and the only thing that anybody can see is their own death. That's the only future that they can look into. And the catchphrase in this, instead of "May the Force be with you" or something like that, a few times in this movie, the phrase, to each his fate. So fate and destiny plays a big role in the story, which of course, the character that's the so-called chosen one, he's not called that again, but basically that's the archetype we have here. And Colin is very much like that Studley, royal hero. He does feel like a swashbuckling Robin Hood kind of type. Or, his charm and charisma reminds me a lot of Wesley from The Princess Bride. He doesn't have that laid-back, ruggish, dangerous kind of Han Solo thing, but he's not that farm boy youth of Luke either. He's a very different kind of hero. So finally they meet the seer, and the seer's young companion, Titch. And so Titch is a boy about, I would say, about the age of 10. So we have an ancient one. Now we have the seer, so he's also like really old. He has the long beard. He's blind and carries a staff that has the little bells that jingle and stuff like that. So when they go to see the seer, most of the group of bandits are left behind, and just Colwyn, the Ancient One, Argo, and the leader of the bandits goes to see the seer. And the seer has this emerald that he's trying to look into, but the beast, he's magical too, and so he fights back and he destroys the emerald. So then it's decided that, okay, the seer has to be at a certain place that's an old temple that's protected, and it's like somewhere he can use his powers where the beast can't stop him. So now they have to go on this long journey to get to this special place with the seer and Titch in tow. And of course, other things happen. So you have, while they're in the swamp on their way to this place, they're attacked by slayers. And then after they defeat the slayers, the beast churns the ground to quicksand. So you have this big thing going with the quicksand and some other stuff. And this is where I need to start being careful about spoilers, because I like this movie, so as much as I'm like enjoying talking about it, I don't want to take away anything that might prevent you from enjoying it yourself for the first time, if you have the opportunity to watch it. So the next level of this adventure, this going to the temple, something else happens, and so they need to find a different means. So it's decided that the Ancient One will go see the Lady of the Web. And of course, they call her a witch. Some of the robbers, and they're scared of her because nobody goes and sees her and comes back alive. But the Ancient One says he'll be able to if he goes alone. So the others journey with him so far, and then he tells them that they need to set camp, and he'll go the rest of the way by himself, because if the Lady of the Web sees more than one person, then they'll all die for sure. So then you have split up with the Ancient One and his story, going to see the Lady of the Web. And again, this is very much where I said like that King Arthur kind of mythology. Like, it very much feels like a story from that. And meanwhile, the robbers and Argo and Titch and the Cyclops and Colin and everybody, they're together setting up camp, and they decide, they're too tired and weary from the journey and fighting and everything to hunt for food, but they don't have food, so they're trying to figure out what to do. And so one of the robbers has 7 or 8 wives. He travels a lot of ground. He's a traveling man. I thought it was funny, even the first time I heard those lines, I'm like, are they deliberately referencing a song? Because it certainly would seem like it. Anyway, there's a village nearby, and Liam Neeson is Mr. Stud Muffin with all the wives and stuff. So he goes and fetches his wife, and she brings some ladies and people from the village with her and cooks food and stuff. So this is another area where if it was a mini-series, you could get to know some of the people that's going to show up. and help. And they're only there for, and part of the story, for this short little window of the story while they're setting up camp and trying to refresh themselves before the next battle. And then it's at this point, now, this whole time we've had a few cuts back and forth between Lyssa and the Beast and Colin and the journey and everything that he's on. And through most of this, you see Lyssa is trapped and the Beast hasn't made like a physical appearance, but on this he starts to make an appearance. And I actually really thought the dialogue and the back and forth between the Beast and Lyssa was pretty good. It wasn't too long and arduous. It was to the point. My problem is the Beast is testing Colin and trying to prove to Lyssa that true love is weak. It's not going to last. And she's telling him that love is better than power. So they're debating, love versus power. And it's very clear he knows that she's the one of the prophecy, and he believes the prophecy, and that's why he's trying to manipulate her into choosing him, because the prophecy is that the queen will choose her king, and their child will rule the galaxy. And so he's determined that he needs her to choose, but he doesn't explicitly says that this is his motivation, but this is what part of the movie that I really enjoyed, is that they get that across really well. His motives and goals, particularly in this scene where they're debating the power of love versus ultimate power, and that it'll defeat love, and love will betray you. So he's showing Lyssa what's going on with Colin and presents Colin with a temptation. It doesn't go as the Beast has planned. And this, again, this is the part where, on Colin's side of things, I would have liked to have known a little more of these other characters and have, a better setup for what happens on that end of this whole debate. However, Lyssa's and the Beast's conversation, I don't know that I would want to add anything to that, because it might ruin it if you tried to stretch out their side of things any longer. But it's a pretty good, solid scene there. Okay, so, again, without giving away spoilers, with the knowledge of where to find the Beast Fortress, the loss of another member of the group, the remaining small army have to round up fire mares to fly them the long distance on short notice. So, because it's going to be sunrise again really soon, they have to go hurry up. Is it sunrise or sunset? It's kind of confusing because the lighting, I don't think, stays consistent with what they're saying is supposed to happen. But anyway, they go, that's not another sidetrack. It's a short mission. It doesn't take very long for them, but it's kind of cool seeing these mares and stuff and them in the hills and the valleys and trying to round them up. And then the horses actually fly. The special effects is not the best, but, it's pretty cool. The Fire Mare's special effects is actually one of the better ones. It's better than some of the special effects during the last battle. So now they finally get to the Black Fortress. It's almost the time where it's going to disappear again, and part of the group manages to get in before it disappears, and then it reappears somewhere else. So those who manage to get in are trapped inside the fortress now, and they got to use the glaive to find Lyssa, but they get split up into different groups. And I liked Lyssa because normally I don't like the damsel in distress unless it has something good to it, just a real purpose, The damsel in distress often feels like a MacGuffin in itself. And so it was kind of nice when you cut back and forth with Lissa. At first, the first few cuts, you feel like she is just a damsel in distress and she's in this otherworldly place, but it also kind of gives you an idea and a concept of kind of what's going to happen when Colwyn gets there. But then each time we cut back to Lissa, we get a little bit more. And until finally, we do have that culmination of her debate with the Beast on love versus power, and ultimately he ends up threatening her and saying, look, you could save all these lives, but the longer you delay in choosing me to be your king, the more people are going to suffer and be destroyed for it. And so she's like trapped and hoping Colwyn hurries up and rescues her. So when he does show up, she is helpful. She's not just a damsel in distress, but she is helpful. And again, there's something from the beginning of the movie that comes back and is useful. And so, again, you get a little bit of the chosen one thing going on, but it's not just Colwyn, it's her as well. And I don't want to spoil it, but the warnings about choosing when to use the glaive wisely comes in handy because he gets to use it, and then he has to figure something else out to finish off the beast. And the prophecies and these other little clues and hints come in together. So I enjoyed this movie. I think it's fun. Like I said, if a movie gets rebooted, that I would like to see. B movies usually don't get reboots, and that's unfortunate. And for many people, I think this would definitely fall under the B movie category. It's not a big budget. It didn't make a lot of money, but I personally like it when smaller movies get a second chance, because this has a lot of potential. It has a lot of different stories and characters that are intertwined here, and I would really enjoy to see that developed more. And it's fun. I think it's very unfortunate that it has a reputation of being a Star Wars ripoff. In a lot of ways, it's actually more original than Star Wars. Yeah, like I said, there's elements that reminds me of Arthur mythology and Robin Hood and certain character types and archetypes and things like that. But it also has so many different layers to it that you don't normally see all these things mixed in together in one story. And so I think the movie as it is, it's not perfect, but it's good. It's fun. It's enjoyable. I would give it a 3. I mean, sets need a little more work. The special effects don't hold up, but the characters themselves, the dialogue is fun. The action sequences are pretty good. The music, awesome. Just awesome. If this were to get rebooted, please don't change the music. Just keep the original score. Maybe a couple new pieces, like I said, if it got turned into a miniseries so that we could flesh out some of these side stories more. It'd be awesome. Another thing, whereas Lissa's one of the only females with a name, and she definitely has the most story arc and importance to the story, she's not the only one. You have the Lady of the Web. You have Liam Neeson's wife. You have some of the ladies that come, or women that come with Liam Neeson's wife. And they have the names too. I don't remember all of them off the top of my head. I just remember Liam Neeson giving his wife a nickname called Petal. But her actual name started with an M, I think. You have a lot of these different characters. You have a 10-year-old character. You have a 16, 17-year-old character. You have characters that are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and older. So you have this wide range of ages, experiences, and skills. And it's cool. I really like that. And Argo, he tends to mess up, but he does do some really brave things, and he does a really, really sweet thing before we get to the final act. And I know I called him Jar Jar Binks, but I couldn't help it. Like when I was watching it, I was taking notes as I was watching it this time, and as soon as he comes crashing in, I'm like, it's Jar Jar Binks. I mean, he just took out a tree. So, it's just kind of interesting. It's fun. If you haven't seen it, I hope you watch it. Let me know what you think of it. If you have seen it, let me know what you think. And now I'm off to watch The Prince of Thieves.